Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Victim's Voice. I'm your host, Lorelei. Today's episode is one that hits close to home for me, not only because it happened in my hometown of Alton, Illinois, when I was just 18 years old, but also because my parents were friends of the victim's parents and knew the family well. This case has never been solved, and 30 years later, the family is still fighting for justice. So hopefully we can get this case back into the public's eye and looked at again by law enforcement, because there is someone out there that knows something, whether that be the perpetrator or someone that he confided in, and we beg you to come forward and give this family some closure, and give Felicia Kemp Rexford the justice she deserves after all these years. Felicia Kemp Rexford, who went by Jeannie, was born on October 5th, 1956 to Dorothy, or Dottie, Bell Kemp and Ellis James Kemp, who went by Jim. Unfortunately, Jim passed away in 1980, and in 1985, Dottie remarried a man named Joseph Valdez Sr. Jim and Dottie had 5 kids together: Jeannie, Carmen, Robin, Eddie, and Cindy. Dottie told the Alton Telegraph that her oldest daughter, Jeannie, was a beautiful baby and that she named her after the actress Felicia Carr. According to Jeannie's siblings, she was an amazing big sister who did all the big sister things. She protected them, taught them things, and helped them anytime they were in a jam. If they needed a shoulder to cry on, she was right there. She was their best friend. Her sister Robin described Jeannie as the glue that held their family together. Her siblings have many amazing memories of Jeannie as a child, especially Cindy, who shared a room with her growing up. Jeannie had given Cindy a record collection when she was just a teenager. This fueled her love of music and going to concerts. One incident that Cindy remembers vividly was when Jeannie was in middle school and her great aunt and uncle had just bought her a new bike. She decided to go for a bike ride in the Milton area of Alton, which is the same area that I grew up in, and there are lots of hilly and bumpy streets around there that can make bike riding fun but also dangerous. Frainer was one of those very bumpy and hilly streets. As Jeannie came down a hill on Frainer, she accidentally hit the front brakes, causing her to fly over the handlebars and through the air. She wasn't seriously injured, but she did knock out her 2 front teeth. Her great aunt and uncle felt so bad since they were the ones who had bought her the bike, so they paid for her dental work throughout her lifetime. In grade school, Jeannie attended Milton School, where she was a candidate for queen of the annual school picnic. She attended East Junior High School and then Alton High School, where she sang in the 9th grade choir. She graduated in 1974. Her brothers and sisters remember her as a fun-loving girl who would go to Block's restaurant on Milton Road with her friends for hamburgers and milkshakes after high school football games. I grew up right by Block's, and they had the best shakes and marshmallow Pepsis. The date of November 30th was an important date in Jeannie's life, and it would be for the rest of the family also. On November 30th of 1975, just 1 year after graduating high school, Jeannie married her childhood sweetheart, Jerry Paul Rexford. Exactly 1 year later, on November 30th of 1976, after a complicated birth, Jeannie's first daughter, Crystal, was born. And 19 years later, on November 30th of 1995, Jeannie would be murdered. Jeannie's second daughter, Jera, was born in 1980. Jeannie loved being a mom, and everything she did was for her girls. One of her favorite things to do with her daughters was to go to the theater to see Disney movies. In fact, when her daughters got too old to go to the movies with Mom, Jeannie would scoop up her sister's kids and take them. In fact, one of Cindy's kids' favorite memories of their Aunt Jeannie is when she would come walking through the door with her big purse that was filled with candy, soda, and microwaved popcorn. Whenever they saw that, they knew that they were about to get treated to a day at the movie theater. After graduating from high school, getting married, and having her girls, Jeannie and her family continued living in the Milton area near her family. She went to work as a teller and as a bookkeeper at several banks in the Alton area, starting at the Wedge Bank on Broadway in 1975. While in her 20s, Jeannie balanced her time between being a responsible wife and mother and having fun with her friends. When Jeannie wasn't working or spending time with her family, she loved to make ceramics, go shopping, which she referred to as retail therapy, play a dice game called Bunko, and go to Granny's Rocker, a popular nightclub in the Alton area back in the 80s and 90s. Jeannie would go there to have fun with her friends and listen to her favorite local bands, Griffin and Beowulf. When Jeannie hit her 30s, however, she traded in her late nights at Granny's Rocker for late nights curled up on the couch in her comfortable PJs reading a romance novel. In 1985, Jeannie and Jerry unfortunately divorced, but they managed to stay close friends. It was also around this time that Jeannie landed a bookkeeping job with a prestigious law firm in the Alton area. As her daughters grew into teenagers and were more independent, Jeannie took a second job as a clerk at Blockbuster Video in the nearby town of Wood River to make some extra money for her family. For those of you who are too young to know what Blockbuster was, it was a video store where you could rent DVDs or even VHS tapes of movies, long before the days of streaming. Jeannie had always been a very independent woman and embraced this even more after her divorce. She bought her first brand new car, a green 1995 Grand Am. She also bought her own home, which she remodeled herself as she had a flair for home designing and landscaping. One thing that Jeannie had always wanted to do was go on a cruise, so she decided that she was going to save up the money and go on one for her 40th birthday that next year. Her family knew that Jeannie was excited about the chance to go on a cruise, so they had decided if she was unable to save enough money to pay for it herself, that they were all going to pitch in to make sure she got to go. Unfortunately, Jeannie wouldn't make it until her 40th birthday. Jeannie also loved going to the library and would read books on how to fix different things around the house. A favorite saying between Jeannie and her sister Cindy was, quote, "I don't need no stinking man, I got a library card," end quote. Which is funny because that's exactly what my wife says about YouTube today. The one thing that Jeannie loved to do more than anything was to buy people gifts. Everyone could always count on a gift from Jeannie for their birthday or Christmas, or sometimes even a package of peanut M&Ms if they needed cheering up. Jeannie knew how to make everyone feel special and loved. She also loved spending the holidays with her family. Christmas was her favorite. Her family said that she was known as the present hander-outer at family holidays, as she loved giving everyone their presents. Even after she got divorced from Jerry, she would continue to buy members of his family gifts at Christmas time. They weren't expensive gifts. Jeannie was thrifty and loved to find a bargain, but the gifts were always thoughtful and things that she had put a lot of thought into. Jeannie knew how to make each and every person in her life feel special. And that's what Jeannie was doing on the evening of Thursday, November 30th, 1995, at the Target store in Alton. Everyone at the law office that she worked at said that Jeannie was in a great mood when she left work that day at around 5 p.m. It happened to be payday and her oldest daughter Crystal's 19th birthday, so she decided to go to the store to buy some last-minute gifts and things that she would need for Crystal's birthday party that evening. Jeannie strolled through the store buying the things that she needed to make sure her daughter's birthday was special, along with a few more odds and ends Christmas presents. She checked out and made her way to her car. The time was roughly 6:20 p.m. Jeannie's youngest daughter, Jarrah, and her friends would drive by the Target minutes later and see the lights from several emergency vehicles. But never in a million years would Jarrah think they were there because her mom had just been brutally attacked. Jeannie shopped at this particular Target a lot, as it was on her way home from work. She even had a parking spot that she liked to park in when it was available, the fourth space along the east side of the building. Facing the Target store, she would have been parked on the right side. Though this area was well lit and only feet away from the doors, the shoppers that were going in and out and the volunteer from the Salvation Army that stood in front of the doors, ringing a bell as they collected donations, were out of view of the green Grand Am. Jeannie opened the back door, and after loading her bags, she then sat down in the driver's seat. But before she even got a chance to shut the car door or start the car, she was attacked, stabbed with a knife twice, once in the abdomen and a fatal stab in the chest. Jeannie managed to stumble out of the car and make her way to a nearby light fixture to try to find help. She collapsed into the arms of a Good Samaritan who had seen that she was injured and had run over to help her. As he held her, Jeannie uttered the last 3 words that she would ever speak, and seemingly the only clue the police would ever have. Gray-haired man. The bell ringer saw what was happening and ran into the store to call 911, while the Good Samaritan comforted Jeannie until the fire department and EMS arrived. By the time the police got to the scene, Jeannie was unconscious. She was rushed to St. Anthony's Hospital, where she was pronounced dead just an hour later. The man who had stayed with Jeannie until help arrived was gone by the time the police got there, so he was unable to be questioned at that time. However, he did call the police station later that night and gave a statement, which detectives said was very helpful. After arriving at the scene, the Alton Police Department quickly moved into action. While some scoured the scene for evidence and talked to possible witnesses, other officers deployed their canines in the area, hoping to track down the person who did this. They believed that the perpetrator ran into a wooded area that was just north of the store. From the beginning, authorities believed that the altercation and murder occurred during the commission of a burglary, but nothing was missing. Inside Jeannie's car were the packages that she had just bought and some receipts from work showing a deposit that she had made. Jeannie's purse was found on the ground outside of the car and still had a few dollars in it. The strap of the purse, however, was cut in half. The police would later try to figure out if the strap had been cut by accident during the stabbing, or if the assailant had cut the strap intentionally to steal the purse, and then Jeannie put up a fight. It is unknown if the Alton police ever did find out the answer to that question. After all physical evidence was recovered, the Alton police had Jeannie's car impounded. The canines that were taken out found nothing, so authorities spoke to over 35 people who had been shopping at Target that day. But that was a dead end also. Jeannie's family was in disbelief and shock when they heard the news that Jeannie had been attacked. The family raced to the hospital, but by the time they got there, it was too late. Jeannie had succumbed to her injuries. It didn't seem real. They had just celebrated Thanksgiving with her exactly 1 week before, and now she was gone. And what made it worse was not knowing why this happened and who did it. Yes, the police believed it was a robbery gone wrong, but they needed to know for sure, and the fact that the killer got away and was still out there and was free to kill again was just too much to bear. Jera also told a reporter during an interview that she was supposed to go shopping with her mom that evening, but instead went with her friends. I imagine she often wonders if things would have been different if she had been with her mom that day. However, hindsight is 20/20, and she would have had no way to know what was going to happen on that horrific day. Jeannie's co-workers were stunned to learn of her death. On Friday, December 1st, the day after she was murdered, they comforted each other as they stood around her empty chair looking at her desk that was filled with pictures of her 2 girls. One friend and coworker cried as she said that Jeannie's life revolved around her daughters. Another friend at the firm told the Alton Telegraph, quote, "It's still hard to believe that Felicia is gone. She was like a sister to all of us," end quote. Immediately after Jeannie's murder, the Target store put up a $5,000 reward for any information that would lead them to the arrest of the killer. The next day, they raised the award money to $10,000. That weekend, on Saturday, December 2nd, the Alton Police Department released 2 sketches of 2 different men who were sought for questioning in regards to Jeannie's murder. One of the men had been seen outside the store on Wednesday, the night before the murder, and was said to be watching people coming and going. The other man had been seen roaming the parking lot the night of the murder. The police said the men weren't suspects at that point, but were said to be acting suspiciously. They were said to be of medium build, in their 50s or 60s, and have gray hair. Could one of them be the gray-haired man that Jeannie had been talking about in her final moments? Over the next few days, the Alton PD got over 100 phone calls in response, but none of those calls led to anything significant. Everyone in Alton and the surrounding areas were in shock and they were scared. Things like this didn't happen around here. Even the police said that stranger-on-stranger homicides were not something that normally happened in this area. But they went on to say that people shouldn't panic because of this incident. What they said next doesn't make much sense to me. Major Hayes stated, quote, "We feel this was an isolated incident and not something that will be reoccurring again. We feel it was a random act," end quote. How do they know it's an isolated incident? They say that Jeannie was most likely not targeted and it was a robbery gone bad. So how can they say the person won't strike again? Especially when they say it was random. If it wasn't someone that was specifically targeting Jeannie for some reason, then they absolutely could strike again. I believe the police were just trying to keep everyone calm, but telling people that they didn't have anything to worry about seemed like a completely untrue statement at the time. However, Christmas shoppers didn't slow down over the next month, even with the news that there was a killer still on the loose. Jeannie's murder did motivate the Target store to invest in cameras for their parking lot, and most people made sure they did their shopping during the day and that they didn't go alone. Police also stepped up their patrols on retail stores' parking lots in the days after Jeannie's murder. They already had a procedure called retail detail that had been in effect for a few years prior to her murder, in which they dedicated 5 or 6 patrol cars each night during the holiday season through the first of the year to patrolling retail parking lots. Police announced that shoppers should take extra precautions to ensure their own safety. Find their car keys before leaving the store and have them ready when approaching their vehicle. Park in well-lit areas and keep an eye on their immediate surroundings. They also said don't take time to put bags into the trunk because someone could sneak up behind you. Get into your car as quickly as possible and throw the bags into the back seat. But Jeannie did all these things. She parked close to the store in a well-lit area. She had her keys out because she had already put her packages in the back seat and was getting in the car whenever she was attacked. Yes, it's good to take precautions, but that doesn't always work. There are sick people in this world who think they can do what they want to anyone and that they are entitled to what other people have. And innocent people get hurt or even killed by these losers no matter how many precautions are taken. On December 2nd, 1995, the Alton Police Major David Hayes said that the detectives had made some headway in reconstructing the killing of Jeannie. He said, quote, "Robbery was clearly the motivation. It appears there may have been a struggle. We do have leads and are headed in a certain direction." End quote. The description Hayes gave of the suspect was a white male with gray hair. His age had not been determined. He also said that the Illinois State Crime Lab had processed Jeannie's car and that evidence had been recovered, yet he declined to talk about any evidence in the case. Of course, one of the first people that detectives looked at was Jeannie's ex-husband. However, he was ruled out fairly quickly. On December 5th, police announced that they are searching for a specific witness who might be able to provide them with important information. After talking to other witnesses, police believed that a middle-aged black woman who was dressed in a blue suit with her hair flipping up in the back had pertinent information regarding the murder investigation. According to what the police were told, this person was out in the parking lot near Jeannie and some other witnesses and was yelling that there was a car leaving the parking lot. The police say that this woman could have already called them anonymously and that they didn't know it, but said that they needed to talk to her. So were they thinking that the suspect fled the scene in a car now instead of running off into the woods? We don't know because nothing was ever said again about this witness. In the weeks following Jeannie's murder, the Alton police had conducted around 300 interviews and followed around 200 leads, yet nothing had led them to the killer. They were, however, looking for a man who called in an anonymous tip on December 15th. They were asking him to call back so they could talk to him in more detail. They seemed to think he had information that could be important in the case. The man had initially told police that shortly after the stabbing, he saw a man named John demanding money from customers on a grocery store parking lot. The man was very specific about the name. But once again, nothing must have come of this lead because it's never mentioned again. A couple months after Jeannie's murder, the police announced they had a suspect, only to come back and say that after contacting some witnesses, they had verified that the person couldn't have been at the scene at that time. Then, on May 21st, detectives thought they had a lead in Mount Olive. They interviewed someone who resembled the composite, but that also turned out to be a dead end. On January 26th of 1996, a Madison County coroner's jury ruled Jeannie's death a homicide after hearing testimony at an inquest. The stab wound to her chest, which cut her heart, caused her death, though she was also stabbed in the abdomen, which cut through her liver. On November 28th of 1996, almost 1 year later, the Alton Telegraph released another article covering Jeannie's murder. The police stated that they had received over 300 tips that they had followed up on. They had several hundred pages of police reports, and still no suspects. Jerry Cooley, the Alton detective that was assigned to the case at that time, told reporters that they had a few more leads to exhaust, and that was it, but that they were never going to give up. They said if there was ever a case they wanted to solve, it was this one, and that they were dedicated and hopeful. Cooley stated that Jeannie was not the type of person you would expect to be murdered. She had been Christmas and birthday shopping for her kids and had done nothing wrong. She could have been anyone's mother, wife, sister, or daughter. On November 30th, 1996, exactly 1 year to the day that Jeannie was murdered, 20 people, including her family and friends, held a candlelight vigil in the Target parking lot near the spot where Jeannie was attacked. It was a cool, rainy night, just as it had been the year before when she was murdered. The group stood around a pole that was adorned with a wreath. In the middle of the wreath was a picture of Jeannie standing next to a Christmas tree. Jeannie's mom, Dottie, said that the family had felt the loss of her daughter deeply and that they were living day by day with lots of mood swings. Jeannie's brother-in-law, Mike Cruz, spoke at the gathering, saying, quote, "1 year ago today, Felicia Jean was cowardly murdered by an unknown assailant. A person with no heart or conscience took her life and robbed us of our loved one." End quote. The first year passed with no answers, then the second year. The third year, another article was in the Alton Telegraph, but said the same things. The case was still open and active. They just didn't have any leads that had led them anywhere substantial. Losing their mom any time would have been hard, but losing her during their teenage years was beyond difficult for Crystal and Jera. Fortunately, they had their grandma and their aunts to support them and guide them through the hard times, and though they struggled and went through things that they wished their mother had been there to help them with, they made it through and became wonderful young women. 8 years passed, and Jeannie's children grew up and had children of their own, all while wishing their mother was there with them to share all of their milestones. Jera got married, and her aunt described how beautiful she looked, like a beautiful white angel. Crystal and Jera lit 2 candles next to their mother's picture before the wedding ceremony, as a way to include her in the most important day in her daughter's life. By this time, Jeannie had 3 grandchildren that she never got a chance to meet. Also, she has a niece that carries her middle name. 9 years after Jeannie's murder, the police were still looking for answers. During this time, 2 detectives traveled to South Dakota, Arkansas, Georgia, and Kentucky to interview people who were said to have made comments about the composite drawings. It turned out, though, that these people only had suspicions and not solid information. So detectives were back to square one. Though they had some persons of interest and even some suspects over the years, nothing had panned out. By 2005, the 10-year mark of Jeannie's murder, the family still didn't have any answers. Detectives said that they had new but minor leads. At this point, Major Hayes said that he believed it would take one of 3 things to solve the crime: information from someone who was with the killer, someone who was told about the crime by the killer, or someone who saw the crime and didn't come forward earlier. The police also state that they think the killer might have been a drifter and had left the Alton area shortly after the murder. They believe if it was someone from the area, that they would have said something to someone. This time, Jeannie's oldest daughter, Crystal, was 29 years old. Following in her mother's footsteps, she had a good job at a bank, and she and her son were living in the home that Jeannie had so proudly bought herself. The girls felt it was important to keep the house in the family because of the memories it held, and because Jeannie had worked so hard to purchase the home. Crystal told the Alton Telegraph during an interview that she found it hard to believe that with all the customers at the Target store that day, that no one saw anything. Jera, who was just 15 when her mom was so tragically taken from her life, was 25 by the 10-year anniversary of her mother's death, and said that since she had become a parent, she could hear herself sounding like her mother. She said that she knew that her mom would be proud of her. She said that she just wanted to know the facts of what had happened and why. The family at this point felt like the police should have gone back over everything from the beginning, just in case they had missed something, or they should have brought in the St. Louis Major Case Squad for assistance. Detectives said, however, that the Major Case Squad are usually assigned to departments that don't have the manpower or because of logistics or the volume of information. But why couldn't they ask for the state police's assistance? There have been several cases I've covered where the police were at a dead end and asked the state or even the FBI for assistance, and they stepped in and solved the case. Sadly, in 2007, Jeannie's sister Robin passed away at just 50 years old. She never got the peace of knowing that her sister got the justice that she deserved and why she was so brutally attacked on that day. This November will be 30 years since Jeannie's murder, and her case has never been solved. There have been several different detectives on the case over the years who have tried different strategies and looked at the case with a fresh perspective, but still no one has been held accountable for Jeannie's death. Crystal no longer celebrates her birthday as it is now the anniversary of the worst day of her life. Jeannie never got to see her kids grow up to be moms and never got to meet her grandchildren. Christmas time is a hard time for the family. Their new tradition during the holidays is to watch videos of Jeannie. Someone out there knows something. Jeannie deserves justice, and her family deserves some sort of closure to know that the person who did this is being held accountable. Hopefully this episode will draw attention to this case, and if anyone has any information at all about the murder of Felicia Jean Kemp Rexford, please contact the Alton Police Department at 618-463-3505. You can also check out the Facebook page, Justice for Jeannie, to keep up to date with this case. For photos and updates on this case, you can check out the Victim's Voice on Facebook also, and come back in 2 weeks for a new case. Until then, stay safe and peace out.